Hello, my name is T.R. Welling, and I'm going to talk to you today about a brief history of the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is actually many times more complicated and detailed, and centuries older than most people assume. But your enemy writes your history for you, and because your enemy writes your history for you, they delete what they don't like. And since the city was founded as a okay, in the military, you have military bases that serve an area effect of places. Well, the Arkansas River is give or take about 100 miles away, depending on the flooding situation of the previous season. So Tulsa was founded. Well, actually, it had been founded by the natives multiple times. It was a normal camp for them to come and go from on occasion, but the Western culture civilization infrastructure wasn't built until the somewhere in the 1500s, maybe late earlyish to middle 1500s, but it was established as a Western culture city, as a serious city by the late 15, early 1600s by the French and the British. The British now remember, the British are different from the English. The English are descendants from the Romans, who are descendants from the culture that Agamemnon put together in order to be able to go genocide the Trojans. Although they weren't called Trojans, they were called the people of Isla. Ilia. Take the N off of the take the D off the Iliad, and you have the name of the city and the name of the people. That was the name of the Ilia is the name of the city, and the citizens of Ilia were the next problem is that what the Greeks called the Trojans. Well, this is not true in any way, shape, or form, because the word Greek would not be invented for close to 1,000 years. And it wouldn't be popularized until the Roman Empire 100 years after that. And the Greeks didn't use the word Greek. The Aegeans didn't use the word Greek. The Aegeans used Spartan. They're Spartan, or they're Athenian, or they're Thracian, or they're what have you. They didn't say they didn't call themselves a specific Greek. That wasn't a Roman invention of, give or take about the time of Caesar, who wasn't born until 100 BC. Anyway, the Romans are English, and the British are Trojans. And your enemy writes your history for you. So every time the English, the Anglo-Saxons from Londonium area, which is also another really interesting story in the same exact pattern, the English infiltrate, conquer the British, and then wear the British face as a mask, calling themselves British, but that doesn't mean they are British. It just means that they're doing the same exact pattern that they've done thousands of times before, where they go in, they conquer, and then they wear the mask of the enemy, because the enemy is more powerful than they are, and always has been more powerful, and always will be more powerful, no matter how many people that the English kill and genocide. Their enemy is still more powerful than they are, because they have they have a higher level of technology, even if they are all but non-existent anymore. Courtesy of when when Washington Territory became a state, the very last aspects of the Trojan culture was obliterated. Now, one of the Trojan princes that evacuated out of Troy before the gates fell. By the way, that was predictable. 100%. That was 100% predictable. The second that the first messengers arrived saying that Agamemnon and Menelaus are building a fleet. They're coming and they're going to kill you all. They're going to breach the gates at some point, so we need to create an evacuation plan. So they had 11 years to create an evacuation plan. So, I'm getting back to Tulsa in a second. One of the princes of Troy evacuated out, and that person and his family settled in the city of Paris. The city of Paris was named centuries, if not millennia, before Julius Caesar did anything with that city at all. That was already the name of the city. The island of the city has been called Paris since before before Romulus and Remus's grandparents were born. So the pattern is that the Trojans evacuated out of Troy to Italy, and then had to partially evacuate out of Italy to points in northern Italy and in Europe, Paris being one of them, London being another, Edinburgh being another, Leipzig being another, so on and so on and so forth, for hundreds of cities and multiple millennia. So, with the Prussians constantly hammering on the French, courtesy of in part Leonardo da Vinci, they evacuated out of the Royal French evacuated out of Paris in France and created a backup capital, a backup area, backup infrastructure in the 1500s called New France, which is extremely well documented. Well, capital 1 was New Orleans. Capital number 2 was St. Louis, named after St. Louis of the French King St. Louis. And super secret backup capital number 3 was a place we call, in today's terminology, Old Carter City in Colorado Springs, which was the first capital of the area, but that's a major story. Back to Tulsa. So the mouth of the Arkansas River, if you go up that river, and up and around through semi bypassing the corner of Oklahoma and Arkansas and Missouri, and you go across the very bottom by a few miles of Kansas and the northern portion of Oklahoma. That's the Arkansas River. Well, its headwaters are in the city I just mentioned a little while ago, Old Carter City. Well, it's a semi-major city. The other city next to it's also the headwater. Some of the headwaters are in Manitou, which is just up the creek from Old Carter City, and the creeks that eventually form into the Arkansas River. Well, some of the creeks, their headwaters are in there. Fountain Creek is one of them. Ruxton Creek, and 6 or 7 other creeks directly that spring from the city of Manitou and Colorado Springs. Well, if you have a super secret backup capital number 3 in the list in New France, you need to have a guardhouse, a guardhouse, but you also that guardhouse needs to have a major fort, major fortification, major castle in direct association with that fort, because the castle backs up the fort. The fort being every X amount of miles across from the mouth of the Arkansas up to and through Manitou, which is where the headwaters are. So 30 to 100 miles away from the forts would be major castles every several hundred miles. Tulsa would be one of those. So Tulsa, in a very real way, was founded by the French and the British to be able to act as a castle to the forts that were along the northern and eastern portion. From Tulsa, the eastern portion of the Arkansas River, Tulsa would be one of the fortification castles that the French and the British set up to protect the river, to protect the Prussians from finding the settlements, finding the super secret palace in Manitou Springs, Old Carter City. Now, would you like direct physical tangible evidence of the palace and the associated information? No problem whatsoever. There's a place called Bancroft Park. And Bancroft Park used to have a very not small building, semi-copy of Versailles, courtesy of the construction of Leonardo da Vinci, phase 1 of that is. Bancroft Park used to have Bancroft School, which was destroyed about 1910. Now, Bancroft School is the smallest, tiniest corner of the original Bancroft building that was there for decades, if not centuries, before 1870. That's what was being protected, is that palace, and that's where the French royal family evacuated to in 1790, 1789, 90, 91. That's in that time period. That's where the French evacuated to. They sent the body doubles east, and to be purposefully arrested and purposefully disposed of according to what the Prussians wanted. They went west to the Arkansas River, up the Arkansas River, past Tulsa by 100 miles, to Manitou Springs, to Old Carter City, what would become Old Carter City, when the city was officially renamed in 1858, if I remember correctly. There was an entire city, an entire infrastructure in Old Carter City before, but politicians and religious nut jobs and such decided to come in and lie, cheat, steal, and do all kinds of state and federal paperwork, and suddenly own the land that people were living on. And when they came into the land that other people were living on, they came with an army and said, "By the way, we own this land now. Go away. We don't care you've lived here for centuries or years, decades, centuries." Now, for further evidence of this situation, there was not one, there was two gold rushes in 1849. There was the famous one in San Francisco, at Sutter's Mill. That one was in 49, but there was another major, massive, hardcore, gigantic gold strike in Old Carter City in 49. There was also two or three other monstrously huge gold strikes discovered in Old Carter City, what would become Old Carter City in about a decade or so. In the late 30s, early 40s, thanks to the Oregon land rush starting in about 1806. So the gold rushes brought people to the Rocky Mountains, to in fact, the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo in Carter Springs is named after the several gold rushes in the late 30s, early 40s because the Pikes Peak or Bust. We must go to Pikes Peak to find the gold in the late 30s, early 40s, several years before the San Francisco strike was found. But it got all the press because the enemy makes your decisions for you. So you have the French in Tulsa. You have the French culture being erased, and partially the Jewish culture in Tulsa being erased, and you have the black culture and the African culture in Tulsa being erased because it hurt those facts and evidence hurt the white people's feelings. I mean, the English, when they came in, went, "We own this land now, so therefore you guys can't be on our land, and we have to erase you and your history and all the architecture and all the infrastructure and we have to erase everything because this is our land. We have to make sure you can't say that it doesn't belong to us. So we have to, if we erase you, then there's no problem. There's no one to make there's no evidence to make a claim that someone other than we own it." So that is the beginning of the waves and waves and waves of genocide that have occurred in Tulsa, and the English doing some seriously uncool stuff regarding Tulsa and doing that. And this is these waves of genocide and destruction and such. Hold on. I'm back. And I was asked a medical question, so I had to answer the medical question, so I put it on pause for a second. So there are numerous waves of genocide and mass murder and icky, disgusting behavior that occurred in Tulsa, and that's some of the things that. And this is before the 1900s. This is the issues and such that happened after that just added 2 sprinkles to the top of the inappropriate pile. So more information for you.